Mike,
Steve.
while we're writing season 2 of The Last Resort, what we should really do with our times, we could discuss the characters' favourite movies.
Interesting concept, Steve, because I like movies, and, well, you like movies, and our characters like movies too.
Then it's settled. The Last Resort Movie Club is born. Good evening and welcome to Bad Scripts. And my name is Steve Jones, and joining me for a final movie club time of this year, Mr. Mike Garlia. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Steve. Yes, all good things have to come to an end, unfortunately, and we have exhausted our list of bad scripts for this season.
Well, we have, but I mean, there's plenty more out there for us to deal with, I'm sure, in the future. But for now, we're taking a little break after tonight's episode to focus on season 2 of The Last Resort. And we can announce that there is going to be a brand new Halloween special with the first new script written for the Last Resort gang, the Camp Coats, in 18 years. The first new lines, a new story. I don't know about you, Mike, but I'm so excited. A little bit of Wii just came out.
Oh, God, that's too much information, Steve. Let's just wait and see when we hear it back on what it's actually like. So, yes, for everyone listening, we have a completed script of the next episode. It's all written and good to go. And we're looking forward to releasing that at Halloween, because it's a bit misleading calling it a Halloween special, because the show itself is not in Halloween. It's like closer to Christmas.
Yeah. It's not set then, is it? It's
No.
around that time of year. However, it is not spooky. Maybe we'll do something.
It depends which way you look at it. Yeah, it depends which way you look at it. The writing could be spooky.
It could.
But it's in that, it's set in that lull between kind of Halloween, bonfire night, and Christmas. You know, there's that period of just waiting for the festivities to begin. It's kind of, I suppose it's around that time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that period of anticipation. Patient. You completely ruined my joke there, Mike. Never mind. So histamine, I don't know. It could be anything. So lots of exciting stuff is coming. Bad Scripts is going nowhere. We are back with The Last Resort. We are doing what we do best and what we know that our listeners love to hear, which is us reading those scripts out. And it's going to take on a new dynamic with you and I having recently written this. And when you take into consideration, we now feel so close to these characters. We know them so well, but we it's been a long time since we put words in their mouth. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not that magic is still there. So we wait with bated breath.
Well, we do, and I was incredibly drunk during every line of writing that script, so I have no idea what's in it. Again,
it's probably for the best. Now, back to tonight and back to today's episode. We have watched another movie, a classic. It is Sam's choice. Shall we hear what Sam had to say about this movie? And then, Mike, you can introduce it for us.
I'm very intrigued as to Sam's view on this one. I am torn as well around this. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she said about this movie, because I don't know about you, before we go into that, this raised a lot of nostalgia for me. Like, probably more than any other film we've watched, this was the most nostalgic.
I got to agree. It's something that, I felt the same about, and we'll get onto that as soon as we hear Sam's Vox Pop. We'll hear what she had to say. Well, I think the thing is, really, I mean, for me, I love a good fantasy. I love something that, you can really escape to. And, that story of good versus evil and right over wrong, and, princesses and fairies and unicorns and darkness. Such such darkness. But yeah, I mean, I love this film. It absolutely transfixed me when I was a kid, and I love it so much. It's awesome. My favourite film is the Ridley Scott classic Legend. Great. So, Sam likes the as she said, the Ridley Scott movie starring Tom Cruise and Tim Curry. I mean, straight away, sign me up for those three names.
She also delivered the loosest definition. She actually called it a Ridley Scott classic. And when I think about a classic and think about what sits in there, certainly as a Ridley Scott, Alien is a classic by Ridley Scott. We'll decide throughout this episode whether we feel this film sits in that trope.
Again, I suppose what you consider a classic is subjective. So for Sam, she thinks of it as a classic. So, I mean, Mike, do you have your regular synopsis for us for the film Legend? Not to be confused with the gangster Cray brothers movie starring Tom Hardy of the same name. This is a very different movie. Do not confuse the two. Otherwise, this will be the weirdest review you've ever heard of a movie.
Or indeed the Will Smith film, I Am Legend.
Yeah,
exactly. Not to be confused with that one as well. So
definitely don't confuse any of those three movies together. Otherwise, that's one really weird night.
I think that'd be a great movie. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, mix them all three up together. It's
mix them all up.
It's like the Cornetto trilogy, but with, maybe we can call it the Viennetta trilogy or something like that. More like a wall sausages trilogy. I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyway, well, for those people that haven't seen it, would you mind giving us a synopsis of the film Legend?
End. Of course I will. So, Legend is a film that came out in 1985. It was made by Ridley Scott, starring a very young Tom Cruise, who plays a character called Jack. We will talk about Jack and that character as we go through this show, but here is the official synopsis or overview of that particular film. Darkness, Tim Curry, seeks to create eternal night by destroying the last of the unicorns. Jack, played by Tom Cruise, and his friends do everything possible to save the world and Princess Lily Miyasara from the hands of darkness. Enter a world of unicorns, magic swamps, dwarfs, and rainbows. Legend.
I mean, it's what, for me, it's that time, isn't it? There was a period in the 80s when you had films like this, like Labyrinth, like The Princess Bride, and Krull, things like that they were all these fantasy movies were out there. There were creatures, there were monsters, there was good versus evil. I love those kind of films. I don't know about you, but to me, as a kid, you just completely get lost in that kind of a movie.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There was a whole kind of in the mid 80s, a whole fantastical element. It Never Ending Story, The Dark Crystal, all those types of films sit as part of this kind of fantasy genre. Some better than others, some worse than others. And, we've definitely circulated towards the 80s with our characters and the films they're talking about on that one. Although the only thing is, and the write-up, though, it's not quite, there is a swamp in it. I don't know if it's a magic swamp, but I don't remember seeing any rainbows at all. And the whole lot, I think that write-up is accurate about as far as going, that's how threadbare the movie plot actually is of Legend. It's a very thin plot, isn't it? It really is. It's very one-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think it's a movie that kind of suffers with its own, with a few things. Like you say, the story is thin. I think there were, if I'm not mistaken, there were 4 versions of this movie that have been released. So you had the theatrical cut, you had in the US, you had the European cut, you had the American TV edit, and then you had the director's cut. So that's 4 versions, all quite different lengths, and loads of different things that changed it. So that at one point she's a princess in the European version, but in the American version, the US version, she's just a lady. I'm not sure why you would change that. I don't understand quite why you would do that. But there were so many weird things that seemed to happen, but then there was no kind of reason for them to happen, or people appeared and then just disappeared and we never saw them again. There was quite a bit of that happening, and it felt a little bit like somebody hadn't had time to finish their movie, or had to rush through it.
I think it was not knowing who the audience was supposed to be honest with you, and trying to appease an international audience in different ways, which is why they changed some of the language, some of the dubbings off, they changed some of the voices, depending on what cut you watched. I mean, all of that is quite well documented. But I will say, Steve, right from the offset, it feels like a fairy tale. It does. It gives you that feel. When I watched it, I felt like I'm watching a fairy tale.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what they were going for. So I think to that extent, I think definitely they hit the tone right there. And I will, I'll not have anybody argue that this film isn't visually stunning, because it is, beautiful. For its time. It's wonderfully shot. The makeup is exquisite. Tim Curry in this movie is genuinely, I mean, the makeup is terrifying, and Tim Curry, as always, is just absolutely on the money. His performance as darkness, you would believe is, in this epitome of evil. This, there's such glee in his face. You see it through all that makeup. You see this glee in his face when anything goes his way. It's truly like terrifying. As a kid, he was the thing of nightmares.
When I was a kid, so like you, Steve, and like anyone else in our generation, we probably watched it when we were children. I was probably about 8 or 9 when I watched it. Didn't quite understand what I was watching. Probably terrified as well. I always thought he was the devil. That's just my way of processing it. And it was I haven't seen it since I was a kid until we just watched it. And then I realized he's this character called Darkness. Does he live in a tree? He seems to live in a tree. It's like a big giant tree.
It's really difficult. It's really weird, isn't it? Because it's like dungeons in a tree. I don't quite know why there's dungeons in a tree, but and who's his father? He speaks to his father several times. This high-pitched voice that appears from time to time.
I think it's him. He's talking to a puppet on his hand. Yeah. He's got a little puppet that's his friend, and he calls
him
father.
Hello, Daddy.
Wait, like, I wondered. Yeah. I mean, so right, the gist of the story for anyone who hasn't seen it is he lives in the base of this tree, but it's, as Steve said, it's like a giant castle, but then it's got space in it, like a void, and he wants to kill 2 uniforms. Sorry, two uniforms. He wants to put on.
He doesn't want anybody wearing the same clothes.
Nobody's wearing clothes. We'll come on to the clothes in just a moment. I had a problem with this. He wants to kill 2. He must have woke up that morning, right, and decided, I can't go outside because the light will kill me. There's 2 unicorns. I need to off them, and then night will fall forever, and I'll get to rule the world. Or at least I think that's what he was doing. Because does it ever, with the unicorns represent light, and does that mean it never gets dark in this weird mystical land?
I don't think it never gets. I think it's weird, isn't it? Well, why is he motivated to take over the world?
Why that day? Really what happened? Something must have happened the day before that we don't see. He's had a bad day, right? Yeah. He's annoyed.
He's been sacked from his job at the call center. He's not happy. He's going to go. It's either that he's going to go on a rampage, or he's going to get one of his goblins to go and kill a unicorn.
He's having a moan. He's having a moan with his dad, or the hand puppet that he's talking to. Which, by the way, interesting fact about that: the only reason why you don't see Tim Curry until quite late on into the film, because he's only got about 20 minutes of screen time in this film. And the reason why you don't see him is because of the sheer intensity of all that latex and makeup putting on him, and it ripped his skin and stuff like that. So they basically decided to do the Jaws thing and not show him for ages, which led to the story.
But it works for me because his voice is so sinister and deep, and we see the hand and the claw like tapping. It has that feel of, do we even want to see what pure evil looks like? I think
evil?
it works.
Is he? He's not evil. I'm sorry, but he's not evil. I watched that, and I actually wrote a note in my pad to say he killed a uniform. He killed. I can't stop saying that now, can I? He killed a uniform. He just walked up there and killed that uniform.
He went, "You're not working at McDonald's anymore."
So he gets the unicorn. He gets the unicorn's horn, but does nothing with it ever, because he doesn't utilize it for any power. That's all he does, really. And then declares his love for the princess. That's all. He doesn't do anything else.
Yeah, he gets a bit lusty, doesn't he? And that's his main motivation at that point. So, yeah, it's a little bit weak on the plot, and that,
just a bit.
And it's difficult because we watching this now as middle-aged men, and you kind of go, ah. As a kid, it was everything you wanted it to be. There were dwarves, there were goblins, there was fairies, there were imps. It was just full of such fantasy that you would have loved it. And one thing that got me watching this now is how different this role is to anything else that before or after I've seen Tom Cruise do. He's never played that kind of role before or after. I mean, this was what, 18 months before he did Top Gun? It just blows my mind.
I'm with you on this one. So he's never done fancy again. He's never, plays Jack the Forest guy. He's the child of the forest or something like that. Okay, let's just cover it now because we are going to come on to it, right? It's very crotch heavy. Okay, any scene with Tom Cruise is very crotchy.
It's extremely. There is a lot of squatting and crouching in what only can be described as Jack's outfit is like a mini dress.
It's I don't know how to explain both outfits. His green tunic one, very Zelda-y. He doesn't even wear tights. He's wearing a loincloth and he is squatting any chance he gets.
I mean, he's getting he's airing those boys. He's making sure that they keep fresh. It can be sweaty in the swamp, and he doesn't want that, telltale sign. So he's being sure to keep everything well aired.
But the camera is always crotch high when it comes to Jack. It's always, and he's like squatting down. There was a shot even when he's fighting darkness. That is all crotch, my friend. That is like literally codpiece.
I mean, I've seen some crotch shots in my time, but that really did take the biscuit.
Never seen that many. And then he does go and get some magic armor. I don't know what's magical about it. But it looks, if I was to describe it, it looked like the dress Kylie Minogue wore in the music video "I Can't Get You Out of My Head."
Yeah, it is. I think it's fair. I mean, they weren't gold hot pants, but it wasn't far away. It was. Who's
the singer that wears the shiny dress like the? Was it?
Yeah, I think.
Was it her?
I think insert any. It could have been Taylor Swift. It could have been Katy Perry. I mean, it did look like she was doing the what do you call it? The MTV Music Awards. That's what it looked like he was presenting.
And I must admit, I did feel myself a little bit. He's got nice legs. He's got long flowing hair. And
never confused.
Just like Tom and the crotch. There we go. That's the way I would describe Legend.
That's the second name for the movie. That's what it was called in Azerbaijan when it was released there.
But we have a love interest, don't we? We have a Princess Lily is the love interest, played by Mia Sara from before Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
It was just before Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That was the next movie. So yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, she played. It was Princess Lily in Europe and then Lady Lily in America. And I don't know why the difference. Maybe they just felt that it wasn't princessy enough, and Where was the king and the queen looking for her? Why was nobody else bothered that she'd been stolen by darkness? One thing that got me was, excuse me, she was supposed to be the epitome of innocence, right? Yeah, the first minute we see her, she's untying people's washing lines and stealing food. That's me. That's the least innocent thing that I've ever seen.
She does. She goes into the what can only describe. It's like the woodcutters kind of like it's a big house. I mean, it's not a small house. It's a lovely house. It's very old medieval, old worldy, and the wife is out. The wife is out there, and she's doing damn pixies, And then she steals her biscuits and eats her food. But you know what I didn't get actually when they have a nice little conversation, and there's some foreshadowing in that scene when she sees the clock. It's foreshadowing what's to come. The princess being chased by the demon, which happens later on in the film and stuff. But we're led to believe that Princess Lily has grown up here because the woman says, "I've known you since you were a kid, and I love you," and all this kind of. She's got this Dorset accent because that's what people had back then, because it made it a little bit more mystical.
Very much like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. That I mean, I'm sure some of our listeners in the US wouldn't realize that a lot of the people from these places, there's a lot of miles between where these people are from, and suddenly they're all living in the same place. So it can be a little bit random, but you know what? They'll just throw a British accent in there, and it will sound more fairy tale.
What I don't get is she's grown up in the forest. We never see the castle because Princess Lily, for some reason, doesn't go home. She just runs around the forest.
I think she avoids being a princess where she can, and she feels more at home in the forest than she does living the royal life. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to get to with that conversation. Yeah, I feel like you're my daughter. It was actually just to kind of re-emphasize she's at home there. She's not lost in the forest. She feels.
But my point is, she warns her about all the things that she shouldn't go near when she runs off. She was like, "Wait, you stay away from what was it? You stay away from toadstools and oak trees." And she's like, "Yeah, I grew up here."
I get told to stay away from used needles and pedophiles, but that's. You
find that very hard to do, though, don't you?
It's difficult. I just can't help myself. Wherever there's a prick, then you'll find me.
So, as a hay fever sufferer, Steve, I've got to say right now, right, this film made me want to take an antihistamine. They're so polleny. There is feathers and pollen and I think Ridley Scott is there going, right, listen, lads, we need lots of pollen and lots of flowers and lots of dust and lots of stuff because there's things flying everywhere. There's no clean shot. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it's supposed to be really dense and swampy and atmospheric the whole time, isn't it? No matter what scene you're in, everything is a little bit dirty air. Is that the best way to put it? It feels very much like, if you blew your nose, it'd be like black. You'd be going,
it would be because there is a lot of glitter. There is a lot of bubbles, and there are a lot of feathers, and
sounds like some of the parties I used to have as in my 20s. But yeah, absolutely.
And Tom Cruise with a monobrow. He has a full-on monobrow. He does. There is no gap there,
and it was an original teeth as well, which
It did make me laugh. Yeah, his original teeth. Those were a pair of gnashes and a half. But it did make me laugh, right? So he's going to take her to see the unicorns, right? I don't know if you picked up on this. He blindfolds her because he doesn't want her to see where he's taking her, and he literally walks her 5 steps. Yeah. And I couldn't help laughing. It just the way, it just made me laugh.
It feels very much like a British pantomime. Come with me. Da-dum, 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 da-da. And now we're in a new scene. It wasn't very, it wasn't very well thought out, was it? They could have had a little montage of them traveling somewhere to visit or something. And
no, they don't. He doesn't even spin around 3 times to disorientate. He just says he puts it on her, and then he walks her 5 steps to a river, and then we see the unicorns, but for some reason they sound like freaking whales.
Yeah, it's like, well, we can't make them sound like horses because they're more mystical than that. So let's put some whale song in there as well and mix it all up. And did you notice that the gender of the individual unicorn seems to change with each different scene? I mean, we've all done the infamous tuck, but as a horse, it's a little bit more difficult to do because there's a lot to tuck away. Um,
It
so I
does
feel like,
change
yeah,
constantly, yeah, from male to female, especially when it rears. It just you're like, oh, that's a funny looking horse with a tallywhacker for a female on that
yeah,
one. Look, there's quite a few things that happen. That's now look, don't get me wrong, the music is exceptional in this film because and I remembered it as a kid. It's scary, it's delightful. The music just speaks to me. I do love the soundtrack.
and
Not
another one
quite.
that there was two different versions of the soundtrack as well.
There
Did you
was
hear about that? Because they did
yes.
the original one, but then they changed it and added some more modern songs in as well. But it's
Yeah, it was Jerry Goldsmith did the original
yeah,
soundtrack, and the test didn't work. And then they got is it Orange Cemetery or some band like
yeah,
that in to do it. And I'm not sure which one I've heard now. I need to
yeah.
look into that one. But I mean, things happen. She throws a ring away, and then is surprised when he dives into the pond after it, which is the big. It's like the Harry Potter pond.
The
It's
lake,
dead small, and then suddenly it's this giant lake, and he's under there a long time trying to
yeah,
find this ring, isn't he?
a huge amount. I held my breath. See how long you ever do this when there's an underwater scene. You hold your breath in a movie. See, could I last as long as they do, holding my breath? I don't know if anybody out there
Which film?
does.
Which film are you watching to wonder if you can last as long as they do?
now that would be telling. Yeah, I mean, how long can you hold your breath underwater? Because to me, it felt like there should have been some snorkeling gear in there. Now, the Tom Cruise of today would have done that himself because he's the adventurer, isn't he? He's the free climbing, free diving. But this is a young Tom Jones who perhaps wasn't as adventurous back then. But
It's a young Tom Jones.
Tom,
When did
well,
when did Tom Jones come into it?
well, it's not unusual for him to be diving. Huh, yeah.
Tom Jones is now diving. He's just taking over from Tom Cruise. Oh my god, that's horrific. That's worse than Blix the Goblin. Seeing Tom Jones do that.
Yeah, it's Tom Jones in his uniform, and we're right there.
We're on a roll tonight, aren't we?
We are. One thing we've got to say is that despite doing all these episodes, we haven't changed the quality of our output throughout all of it. We've been consistently inconsistent the whole way.
The whole way. But so the lake freezes over when he's in it for some reason because the unicorn's now been taken by the goblins, who I love. I love the goblins. They are for me, and Tim Curry being the exception. But the goblins, there's Blix and the others, the one that looks like a kind of like a weird pig. I think they're brilliant. I really think that they made the film for me.
They're a bit slimy as well, weren't they? It was like, ooh.
Well, Blix is really slimy. It's like, and I remember being frightened as a kid, not knowing what the hell this thing was. And it's like, and Blix talks in riddles as well. Some really good riddles in there, and and they kill the poor uniform, and it puts for some reason everything just. Did I say it again? Did I say uniform?
You did.
It's a thing now. It's a thing.
You're literally not going to be able to say unicorn ever again on. Yeah.
Alicorn. I'll just say alicorn.
Just think unique horn.
Yeah. Thanks for that coaching, Steve.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm gesticulating the horn just for you.
I know. You really are. Please stop doing that. So everything freezes over and then we're introduced to some really creepy bastards. Which is the man-child, forest child Gump.
The Forest Gump, he is
the Forest Gump.
Yeah.
He is creepy.
Do you know why? And do you know why his voice sounds weird as well?
Yeah, it was dubbed, wasn't it?
It was dubbed because he's of European descent. He actually had an accent which I quote one of the executives said, "He sounds like a Nazi. We can't have that. We need to dub him." That was the words they used.
Really?
Yeah. And I think he's like Austrian or Swedish or something. It's not.
So he looks about 10 in the film.
He was 19 when
he's
they
19.
Yeah, and it was actually the girl who played the fairy who dubbed his voice as well. So there's, it's a little bit.
The fairy. So this is the fairy who's either in human form, or fairy form, and she's
Yeah.
in love with Jack, or it's a fishing line with a light on the end of it that you can see so clearly now in HD. Someone
Don't
just there
spoil it for
with a
everybody.
rod, with a rod. Ding, ding, ding. Una the fairy. That's
Yeah.
the name. Una the
So
fairy.
yeah,
she
so
just
she
wants
did
a
the
kiss
voice.
from Jack.
Yeah, that's right. Well, she says that. That's how it starts. It's never just a kiss, though, is it? That's the point.
So, Forrest Gump does a riddle, and then he has a complete and utter meltdown when he gets it right. I mean, meltdown. He smashes his violin. He's got a violin or a fiddle or whatever it is. He's not happy at all. There's all these children of the forest all looking on, like like they're all climbing all over each other and stuff. It was creepier than the goblins. At least the goblins know who they are, and they can just accept that. Gump and the friends are. I thought just they were creepy. They're the things that nightmares are made of.
Yeah, and there was a lot of atmosphere and there's a lot of characters at one point. I wasn't quite sure why some of them were there. I mean, I know it was to try and pad out the story, but I wasn't sure how they were helping. They were more hindering, especially when you think about like the dwarf characters. They were all sort of there, but what was their purpose? What were they there
I don't know,
to
because
do?
Jack's never seen them before. They just appear when the unicorn dies, but then they say they've always been there and they know who Jack is. But Jack's like, oh, I don't know. I'm a forest kid myself. I don't know who you are, Forrest Gump. But now they just suddenly get involved in the story, and then they give him a drink, and then they're all mates, and they help him on his quest. And one of the questions I had, right, is Jack says sorry to the unicorn.
Hey, you got it right.
Thank you. He comes back to speak to Gump and says we need a champion to go on this quest. Is Jack telepathic? Is the horse speaking to him through his horn? I mean, because none of that's ever covered and explained, and was like, oh, right. And then that's where Jack, they say, oh, well, you'll have to do, Jack. You'll have to do.
Never mind. I mean, we've all been there on a Friday night. But I think, it must have been some sort of unicorn telepathy. I think when you think about, like, why did he kill the witch? Why did he have to kill the witch? Was that to get to the darkness? I can't remember exactly why he kills the witch. Is it to get something?
Well, she represents vanity, doesn't she? So he gets his sparkly dress from the Cave of Wonders.
Yeah.
And his sword and his shield.
Right.
Una the fairy reveals herself and says it's a little secret, Jack. And he's like, oh, I'll keep a secret for 20 minutes. Yeah. And then they go on this big quest, which is, I'm sorry, mate, around the freaking corner from where they are. It is literally another 10 steps away. And they're in this and it's not snowing anymore.
No, but that's the kind of adventures you had as a kid when you went off with your mates. We're going to go on an adventure, and you went 10 minutes around the corner to the woods at the corner of the park to hang out and do stuff. And it felt very much like that's exactly what they'd done. And they've lived this close to darkness all this time, and nobody's come across it.
Never knew. They never came across this creepy tree, not once, which is literally because the swamp is on the creepy tree. But the hag girl, again, that was played by I think an American actor who was in Star Trek for a while.
Yes, Robert. Yes, he played the ghost in Deep Space. The ghost, the holographic Doctor in Deep Space. That's right. Yeah, in Voyager. Yes,
but she's like little boy, little boy. And I again, it's these little set pieces which Ridley Scott does so well. And she represents vanity because she looks at a reflection in the mirror, giving Jack enough time to literally chop her head off. Again, she was doing nothing wrong. She was in the swamp minding her own beeswax. Well, he turns up.
She did say she'd like to eat him.
Well, I would have liked to have eaten him too with all those crotch.
I'm not sure that made me hungry. If anything, it may have had the opposite effect.
Depends on your perspective, Steve.
Oh dear, I'm not going to IKEA and having the meatballs. That's for certain. Oh,
again. And then they're in the dungeon. Like
yeah,
that is
something.
literally
Well,
they're in the dungeon, and then suddenly there's these big demon dudes hacking bodies up for some reason.
and they kind of get locked away, but then they're not. And I don't. It's one of those movies. It almost felt like one of those times when when you nod off for like a few seconds in the movie and stuff happens and you wake up and it's like moved along an hour. It's actually you've been asleep for ages. It felt like that kept happening in the film, even though I was wide awake. I was
It's
like,
like the whole.
where are we now?
I think
What's
Ridley
going on?
Scott
Where
was
have we
just
missed
he
it?
was obviously just tearing the script up, saying we don't need these pages, too expensive. Take these
Yeah.
out. Take these out. Let's just. I think he just got fed up. He was like, yeah, we just need to end the bloody film. So you're right. They get stuck in the dungeon, and all the fairy wants, all Una wants, is a kiss from Jack, and she'll get the keys and let them out. He can't even do it. He didn't do it. He was like, no, no. And he gets really nasty with her as well. He's like, no, you can't charm me, you damn fairy bitch.
Yeah, and it's like
She's upset. She's sad.
she is. She's been
Gump's
rejected.
sad.
Yeah,
Gump's sad. He thought he was going to get to see a bit of action because the two other guys that were with him, very famous actors who play kind of like hobbits. They wanted to see a bit of action happen. It never happened.
and we think maybe there'll be a bit of action with darkness then because it looks like he's changed Lily's outfit. Is that fair to say to make an evil
the
version
dancing
of her?
dress? Yeah, the dancing dress hypnotizes her and then jumps on her. Did you not? Right. So there's parallels to Beauty and the Beast. It became like the Enchanted Castle in Beauty and the Beast with there's like kind of that baby imp that's crawling around the table just looking on and stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's now Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. There were elements, weren't there, of that?
I expected Vincent to be hiding in the corner somewhere.
Yeah, Linda Hamilton in the court, around.
So yeah, they have a dance, and the cherub looks on, and then she becomes, for some reason, she's dressed all in black. She has a monobrow too, which is kind of penciled in.
That's the most evil of the eyebrows in the monobrow. It's the sign of that.
You can't trust someone with a monobrow. I'm sorry, but you can't.
No, and I mean, and you're in somewhere that cold and damp. You don't need as plunging a neckline as that either. It would play havoc with your chest. You'd end up with the real infection there if you're not.
It's going to get chappy, isn't it? It's going to be chappy.
Definitely.
And then at 63. Sorry, go on.
And she's pretty cocky and confident when she's dealt with this hoofed, like 8 foot tall epitome of evil, this devil-looking creature who terrified me as a child, and I'm sure I would not have been as cocky as she was. He
literally climbs out of a mirror, okay? And she is not surprised. She doesn't look shocked at all. She's just like, cool, Candyman, let's do it. And you're right, she's like, I'm being, her voice changes, her mannerism changes. She's like, I'm evil now, and I will marry you, but I want to kill the unicorn.
But you know what? That moment, Tim Curry, when he hears those words, it was just it was just great. He just like,
he's a poet.
You want to kill it yourself? It's like, yes.
He is a poet. He's a poet. Every line he says, it's creepy and it's indulgent and it's just intoxicating. That's the best way I could explain the way he delivers those lines.
I know. I mean, I've not seen him deliver lines like that since Anaconda, maybe, or Clue, or even Home Alone 2. I mean, there's times when possibly he was that lively, but
he made some choices. He's still a legend though. So that's all happening, and then for some reason Jack and Gump and the team fight the Silent Hill baddies for a bit in the kitchen.
Yeah, do you see in the background when that's happening? There's when they're all sort of in the dungeon. You see somebody being proper tortured, proper beaten into a pulp by one of the jailers. It's really quite graphic in the background. You see the shadow of it all going on.
That must be the woodcutter, because we don't see another single adult human being at all in the entire show, in the entire film, do we? So
it's a strange
very
one,
self-contained, yeah. But
You
I
don't know
will say
what's
this. The darkness is a poet. He obviously wants to be in love, and he killed a unicorn. He declared his love for Princess Lily after seeing her for 27 seconds. I don't think he's a bad guy. He's got a bit of an anger issue, yes, but if I was living at the bottom of a tree, I'd probably be a bit angry too. And he does talk a bit too much. He likes monologuing. He's a monologuer.
He's very much the Shakespearean bad guy, isn't he? He's like this epitome of this strong, articulate. It's the British accent as well. What can I say?
He's got it.
It's that it, and he does deliver it with such verve and skill that to me,
he's hoofing brilliant. Yeah,
absolutely. If anybody, for me personally, I feel like that is a tour de force in terms of representing an evil embodied on the screen. I think he is the perfect, because it's not just, like a lumbering, nasty, spitting, horrible. He's eloquent. He's shows lust and want. It's not just evil. There's a real visceral element to it that makes you feel like there's a desire to not just have, but to devour and to consume, like all the seven deadly sins. It kind of embodies all of those things.
Why do you keep licking your lips when you keep saying this?
It's making me salivate. I'm sorry, Al.
It really is. And he's ripped. He is ripped. That devil, apart from his back, he's got gross back. It's a bit lumpy. But he is ripped and he likes wearing long robes. Now, if I was ripped and I was 8 foot tall and I had these big, massive black horns, big teeth, big sharp teeth, and I got beaten by Jack's squat and crotch moves, I'd be a bit pissed.
In his mini dress, yeah.
I would be annoyed.
When they get into a sword fight, just randomly, because it's like he's 8 foot tall and has magical powers, but decides to engage in a sword fight with Jack. Jack is able to deflect his shots quite ably. Yet this guy is so much bigger than him and so much stronger than him, but somehow he's able to, defend himself skillfully, despite, as far as we know, Jack never picking up a sword before in his life because he just lives in the forest. There'd be no reason for him to.
It's natural. He's the champion they needed. They didn't know.
Not the one that they wanted. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but you're absolutely spot on. And then there was a weird kind of shot, and maybe I've the crotch. There was a lot of ass shots as well in there as well. I've got to say, if you just think of legend, folks, just think about Tom Cruise's crotch shots, and when you watch it, you'll know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the unicorn horn goes to fall in like what looks like.
I thought it was lava. Right? Thought it was lava.
And he puts his hand in it and grabs it and doesn't even. He's like, ah.
But I think it might have been hot orange soda. I think that's all it could have been, because the way he puts his hand in it, then he goes, "Oh, that's a bit warm," and pulls it out. It's obviously just orange water, dirty water. Maybe someone's not flushed the urinal before, after they used it.
It did look a bit pissy. It did look a bit pissy, and I would have expected Darkness to just to lob it out and have a go there. And I think I want to see it just because of his frame and and how lumpy he is.
You want to see what his manhood's like. This great guy.
So Princess Lily does the right thing, doesn't she? She saves the unicorn, and she shows that she's not lost herself. And then for some reason they put up all these plates, and lightness has mass.
Well, because they say, he says it right at the very beginning in that opening monologue, light is my destroyer. So that's foreshadowing, obviously, that that's what doing. Yeah. So, and then they do this thing where the lights are reflected by all the mirrors all the way down from upstairs to hit him. So it's all these reflections, the lights bouncing off like something. And it reminded me of a game I had on the Commodore 64 called Dan Dare, and you had to do exactly the same thing with mirrors. You had to aim them, and they went down tunnels, and you had to get them all aligned, and then you'd open the hatch at the top, and it would have to go and hit the bad guy, the Martian, and kill and kill him. And it reminded me very much of that. But that's why it feels like the light has mass, because, and as far as its power to destroy, even though it didn't really destroy darkness, it pushed him into space.
It aliened him. Ridley Scott said, "You know what? Need to kill darkness somehow." Where did I do that before? When you got a beast that's much bigger than you. Alien. Yeah, she knocked him out the airlock. They aliened him.
Yeah, well, maybe just out of shot after he disappears off into space, a xenomorph comes and grabs him and goes.
I think that's what happened. Can you imagine like what that would look like when it comes out of darkness?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So maybe that's where
I'm now imagining darkness riding on the back of a xenomorph.
Maybe
like
that's
his
where
chariot.
That's where the xenomorph came from. It came from darkness. It's the love child.
If anybody wants to draw that, some fan art, darkness riding on the back of a xenomorph, please send us that, because that would be amazing.
Feels like a tattoo, guys. It feels like a tattoo.
So it feels like maybe we should start to wrap things up.
Feels like Ridley Scott just used his own ending from a different film, and then he used a reshot of Jack jumping into the lake with Lily stood there, despite the fact that Lily's now unconscious for some reason because the darkness is leaving her. And that's my theory. I think that it was all a dream. Lily was sleeping. Yeah, he wakes her up and she's like, "Oh," and then they run off into the forest and everyone waves for a long time.
And because they kind of go, "Oh, we've got to go now." Is that what? Where to? I don't understand. There's no kind of nobody
waving at the camera. I'm like, I actually read it. Who are they waving at? Are they waving at us? Are they telling us like, yeah, maybe, but
maybe.
I think it was all a dream because that would explain everything. It would explain the inconsistencies. I wish it was a dream where she woke up. She was like, "Jack, you're my true love," and because she's a bit cagey in the beginning. But the only question I've got really is the goblins just disappear. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It's another one of those situations. We talked about this in another podcast where a character just disappears for some reason, and Blix the goblin, along with the other goblin dudes that he's with, they just go. And I think that was just, maybe they're on the cutting room floor somewhere. I wanted to see more of those. I wanted a bit of a fight,
I think, well, maybe they served their purpose. Their purpose was to go and kill the unicorn. They did that. And then maybe, they thought, well, I've done my job. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. So
I think a spin-off with Blix and his adventures with the piggy guy, the pig face guy, would be absolutely fantastic.
Blix and the pig face guy. Now there's a series.
There's only,
Netflix,
there's only
Netflix. If you're listening, if you're listening,
give us a shout. We'll write it.
There's
only if you think about the whole film as a total, right? I'm going to break down the locations for you. This is how small and condensed it all is. There is a forest.
Yep.
There is the woodcutter's lodge.
Yep.
Or the baker's lodge, depending on what they are, because there's a lot of food on those tables. There is the swamp, there is the creepy tree, and there is the dungeons, and that's it. And a pond. And a pond.
Which is kind of in the forest anyway, isn't it?
Which is in the forest, yeah.
It does feel very claustrophobic, all of it. There's no open scenes, is there? It is very dark, and I don't know whether that was limitations of the budget or what, but
well, it cost $25 million to make and only got back $12 million on release. So it wasn't, and it was genuinely panned by critics. But
it was.
I don't think it's quite hit cult status, but I do think it has a place.
It certainly does, and for all that we've talked about those things around the weak story and the and the lack of breadth of development for the characters and what have you, I still would be interested to hear your score for the film Legend. I want you to give it me in a number of goblins, please. So how many goblins would you give the film Legend, Mike?
For nostalgia and the soundtrack, the imagery and the sets, which are just absolutely beautiful to be done in camera with no CGI. I've got to give Ridley Scott that. What takes away from it is probably the script, the story, the dodgy acting as well. So for me, Steve, I'm going to give it 2.5 goblins.
Ooh, that's a not a great score. I'm going to disagree with you because I think this story is for a particular audience. I don't think it needs to be overly sophisticated in terms of it's a tale of good versus evil. It's the fight, it's the battle, it's the monsters and the crazy creatures of the forest, and it's at this time. And I think what elevates it above all of that is Tim Curry's performance. I think he just blew me away with that performance. He's one of those people who, we've done our share of acting that inspired me to want to get involved in it. I'm going to give Legend 4 goblins.
4 out of 5 goblins. Wow.
That's literally, I feel quite strongly about it. I realize that it does have some weaknesses as an adult looking back on it, but I think of its time and when I watched that, I genuinely loved the movie, and it still had so much in it that I felt nostalgically for it that I will stick with my 4. So
that is the highest rated film we've done so far.
By myself, anyway. I mean, it may, as a combination, I think there might be some discrepancy there. But you know what? I really enjoyed watching it again. So there have been movies in the movie club that I have not enjoyed watching that have been a chore to watch. I won't name them, but I'm sure our listeners out there, if you've been listening and watching along with us, I'm sure there's a few out there that you struggled with. So for the final time in this series, we're going to leave everybody with Mike's final words of the evening. I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you for joining us. Remember to check out our Instagram, our Facebook, and our Twitter. Be sure to get on there and drop your comments. Let us know what you thought of the film, whether you agree with us or don't. And stay tuned, because coming up very soon will be, as we said, the special episode, a brand new script from Halloween. So keep watching. It's only a few more weeks away, and we'll be joining you with some brand new episode. So finally, Mike, we'll leave you with the last words.
The last word for this one would have to be crotch shot. Bye, everyone. Stay
Bye.
Bad Scripts was written and performed by Mike Garlia and Steve Jones, a Beach Tide production.